Hello and welcome to News Express, exclusively brought to you by Business AM, Nigeria's fastest growing financial and business newspaper. I am Chukunonso Modi. Now let's take a look at the stories hitting the front page this week. Now the big headline, really interesting one. Hell had no fury as FG set to unleash inflation rot. Sub-headlines, Analysts warn 2022 for words no love lost. With planned subsidy removal, fiscal eggheads plan 5,000 naira palliatives to 40 million, but Nigerians to pay 340 naira per litre for fuel. Now another big headline, Aito, indigenous player responds to internationally familiar crisis. Sub-headlines, deploys equipment in Nembe Creek to stop leak. And amid crisis, Aito responds to communities with relief materials. 6-year-old Nigerian company with 70% vandalization of its NCTL needs support, says experts. Now, other headlines to look out for: finance and investment, still higher profits for banks. Under Nigeria Frontier Market Corner, we see Imo's many investment bottlenecks. Then looking at technology and innovation, Dambata NCC quest for innovation. Now, don't forget to check out Executive Knowledge Series with women's access to mobile family planning. Then there's Visionary Voices with the test of pandemic preparedness. And under commodities and agriculture, Nigerian shellfish needs exploitation. Now let's bring in Philip Isakpa, the publisher Business AM, to help us make sense of the headlines. Good morning, Philip.
Hello, good morning.
Good morning. Okay, so let's look at the first headline, the very interesting one. Hell had no fury as FG set to unleash inflation rot. Now, this piece speaks about the fuel subsidy policy set for the new year, and analysts are likening this to a government acting out a hell had no fury like a woman scorned policy against the citizens, and one that they see the government appearing to be acting in a knee-jerk manner and will be extending the misery quotient for citizens. Now, this is a very interesting yet serious way to put it. Do you agree with this description by the analyst, Mr. Philip?
Yeah, this is an interesting thing that has happened. We've been hearing this for some weeks now.
Yeah.
There's always a background to this.
Mm-hmm.
The fuel subsidy problem for years, if not decades. And then you've come to a time when the pressure has been on the fiscal side of government business for quite a long time.
Has.
And there has been calls, for this to be removed for a very long time. Because people have weighed the opportunity cost of spending such a huge amount of money on subsidy, against what you could probably have spent on put on social spendings, for instance. Healthcare, for instance, education is the other one, that people have talked about for a long time, So you're spending quite a lot of money. And then you had all the sleaze around it, people talking about money being taken out of the system, through this subsidy means. We had a situation in the last government where so much money was given to fuel subsidy and then the fuel not coming in. But the key thing really is that government has come to a point where revenues are down seriously, and then it finds itself spending such an amount of money, on subsidy that the treasury doesn't have, So it's saying we're going to be pulling back on this, But analysts are saying that you might do this, but it appears as if you're not thinking through the way, the approach, the manner and approach that you're going to unleash this on the people.
Yes.
Because inflation is a key issue. Because once you begin to increase, so fuel has what's it called an impact on a lot of things.
It does.
Within the economy. So if you take this out, the way you're planning to do, then you're likely to have an avalanche of impact on the entire system. And one key issue that will happen is that inflation is going to be to hit the economy really hard. We've described it as hell hath no fury, because it's like government is just sitting down and then thinking that once the international monetary agencies, the World Bank and IMF, made these suggestions, that they just jumped onto it, and then you talk about, they say, okay, we're going to do a palliative of 5,000 naira per month, to 40 million people. Some people have made calculations, and found that if this was to continue for 1 year, you find that the spending, that you're going to be putting down on it, will be more than all the money you're spending on fuels, on the subsidy. So that is where they're saying, the reason why they're saying that it is not a well thought through policy that you're putting in place. Almost like you're just waking up and then deciding, oh, this is the time to do something, without carrying people along, and then without trying to solve the fundamental reasons why you have this massive amount of money going into fuel subsidy. The fundamental basis for fuel subsidy is because you are importing fuel from abroad.
Yes.
And you are spending your external reserves, to do this. And that is the key reason. You have import costs, put into it, landing costs, they put it, they call it, put into the fuel that you're selling domestically. Meanwhile you are an oil-producing country.
Yes.
So there's quite a lot, to unpack in this policy that they are planning to unleash on the citizens. And then inflation is the key thing, because prices are going to just shoot through the roof.
Yes,
and then
definitely.
You're going to have serious problem.
Yes.
The key what major fallout could be, that there could be massive unrest, as a result of this policy that they're trying to do, because they seem not to have thought through it seriously. So I share the view that inflation is going to be a major concern. I share the view with the analysts that inflation is going to be a major concern. I share the view that we hold that this hasn't been thought through seriously. In the holistic manner that policy needs to be thought through. Everything seems to be done in terms of we have money, we don't have money, so let's do this. We don't have money, let's do this. We have money, let's care less. When you have money, you don't care. Now you don't have money, you just say, okay, where do we cut? Stop going. So sometimes individually you can say, in a household you can say, let's stop going to the gym.
Yeah.
No more gym, no more this, no more that. But sometimes you need to think about it and say, if we stop going to the gym and then we have health issues,
complications,
then we are likely to spend money going to the
exactly.
hospital.
True.
So if you think carefully about these things, you will know what is the right thing to do. You have a government that's been around for 6 years plus, and the issue of refineries, refining crude oil within your borders, within the country, so that you don't import this product, has not been dealt with, which is alarming. You understand? You have 4 refineries. You can't take a decision as to whether let the refineries go, you sell up the refineries, or you hand them over to people who can really handle them and get them to produce. So there's quite a lot of things that you think the fiscal policy managers, haven't really sat down seriously to think about what is driving this. Pressure from the IMF and the World Bank will be one of the reasons that have been government has been accused of right something ahead in 2022 when this policy is unleashed on the people.
Okay. Now, speaking on the 5,000 naira pay per month that government wants to give as transportation. Now, NNPC has hinted that the subsidy removal, that's a fuel price of 320 naira per litre and 340 naira per litre. And then, like you said, the government is promising to handle the impact on low income and poorest of Nigerians by promising to pay out 5,000 naira per month. Now, this is a funny suggestion because, like you said, I don't know how feasible that idea is. How do they even identify these poor people? Do they mean poor as in those who don't have light, or poor? I really don't get this whole thing that the federal government is trying to do. And like you said, how long will they do it? Will it actually get to these poor people like they say?
And again, that comes round to the issue of how much thought, how much thinking, goes into policy formulation or the decision that you come up with. And one of our columnists talked about where does information come from. So you have a fiscal policy information, that ought to come from the federal government, the Minister of Finance. But you have all sorts of manner of people talking about it. Identified that the NNPC group managing director was speaking about it, and was deciding, for a fiscal policy like that is under the purview of the finance minister, was the one already suggesting that you could have a fuel going for 320 to 340 naira per litre.
That's a lot.
But, that's quite a lot, jumping from 165 as it is today, to 320, 340, But sometimes some things are scaremongering, so that you put the people in such a state that they have nowhere to run to, or they have no advancing reasons against what the policy is about. But the key thing is that at 340, at 320, a huge amount of money. But you don't say, we're going to give 5,000 naira to 40 million people. You've already decided that 40 million people. There's nothing, no explanatory, no document, documentary evidence to say, it's 40 million people, and this is how we arrived at 40 million people.
Exactly.
There's nothing suggesting to say, 40 million people. Is it 40 million people own houses or own cars, and they use fuel, and how is it supposed to cushion the effect of removing the fuel
subsidy?
Let me maintain the point. I'm a pro-market person. But the key thing is that when government begins to make out policy, that will affect people, there needs to be clear thinking, and it needs to be thought through carefully, because first you have to look back at some policies in the past that have been that with regards to what's called transferring money to people, and you have 5,000 naira being talked about, 40 million people, and one analyst one analyst had already said, you are talking about 40 million people. Actually, you should be looking at 100 million people, or 120, 130 million people out of 200. If you are looking at the vulnerable and the vulnerables and the poor people, because they say this is the global capital of poverty, isn't that what they said?
Yes, that's what they said.
A year or two. So if this is you cannot be talking about 40 million people out of 200 million people, because I think the least estimate at the time that they mentioned it was that like 80 million or so, that fall within this bracket of poverty, and then they're talking about when you talk about poverty, you're talking about less than that $1 existing on less than $1 a day, if not lower, So how do you come about the 40 million people that you have you are talking about, and how did you arrive at who will benefit from this? So first of all, there's the question of the number of people who are going to be impacted by these 5,000 people, 5,000 naira. And then the other thing is that what is 5,000 naira in a month?
Honestly, what is it?
What is it if you are trying to say this is to alleviate, to cushion the effect of the impact, when there's going to be a whole lot of things that will shoot off the roof.
Exactly my point.
When these policies, so you have transportation, you have food, and so many.
We don't even have light, so people will use more generators. Yes.
So you have, so that there are so many fundamental issues regarding the structure of the economy that needs attention, that needs to be resolved. So many issues that need to be resolved, and we don't see how this is being done. We don't see how they're making the impact, that can be of benefit to a majority of citizens, and then you don't just wake up and then you begin to prepare people ahead of, especially with this festive season.
Coming
up, So you are already preparing their mind that, once you guys have finished enjoying Christmas and New Year, something is going to hit you.
Enter hell.
And that's it. And that's what we call it, hell hard.
No,
exactly. It's almost like government is angry with its people. And it's going to unleash this inflationary upside on the people. And analysts are worried, are concerned. You can have analysts who are emotional about it in terms of that this is not a good time to introduce this thing.
Yes.
But there are those who are concerned about the general well-being of the economy, because inflation is one thing that put under check. We have had inflation of double digits for like forever. And inflation at the last count, I think 15 point something or 16%, and then you're already preparing ground for inflation that could go to 20% if not more, as a result of this, and it's just about how you think, through a policy, and how you begin to implement that policy and make sure that it doesn't have a negative impact that is so huge on the economy on one hand, and then on the citizens on the other hand. So that those are the key things. 40 million Nigerians, 5,000 naira a month, whether it's for 6 months, whether it's for 1 year, and then you always know that once something is put in place, it doesn't, they don't stop.
Yes,
you go on and on.
Has to continue.
We have an AMCON that was put in place to last for 10 years. Of course, it's at the National Assembly, so it's an institution right now. Because the National Assembly has passed what's it called, a bill or so that will allow it to almost stay forever. Not a bad thing, but we know that it was supposed to come as a bad valve to clear the mess in the banking system, but for 10 years, and but now it's now an institution on its own. But that's an aside. But we know that you introduce this 5,000 naira. When 6 months are up, you find that you are in a position where you cannot pull back.
Yes.
You extend it, and then you extend it, and becomes another avenue for God knows what the typical corruption that we see happen all the time.
Honestly, this issue is one that has so much loopholes, because 5,000 naira, 40 million Nigerians, it's a whole lot. Okay, moving to the second headline. Aito indigenous player responds to internationally familiar crisis. Now, Aito had a major wellhead leak crisis, catapulted to the position of becoming the very first indigenous player to deal with a crisis of this proportion. That is a familiar occurrence in the operations of major international oil companies, which are not heard of. Mr. Philip, how do they handle this crisis? What measures are being undertaken to kill the well?
I think we need to look at this from the position of, the oil industry. Okay. In the last decade, have had indigenous players giving. Not more than, last 15 years, because it was the last government that actually made it possible for indigenous players to come fully into operating some of participating in the oil industry in such full force. Ordinarily used to be international oil companies. The Shell, the Mobil, and the others. Texas, what's it called, and so on and so forth. Anyway, Jeep and the rest. who were key players. But for the first time, we are having a major, an indigenous company, 6-7 years old the company is in terms of controlling that asset, and that particular trunk line, that where you have this problem is a key, is a major transport, oil transport, oil transport line, that used to be under the control of Shell. Shell used to manage it until they've sold down a lot of their assets.
Yeah, they have.
That was one of the assets that ITO took over. So what this story is trying to say is that this problem, you might have had this crisis happen, across in different parts of the world where international oil companies operate, and there will be little to nothing, in terms of, because some of them we will not hear of, because they probably will quickly deal with it, But for an indigenous company that is 6-7 years old, who's coming to this, and then encountering this, for the first time, it's a huge problem, and they needed to be provided a great deal of support.
Yes.
In terms of the first time they are coming to this, it's not something that should be. It's alarming in the sense of the impact of what has happened, but it's something that ought to be dealt with as a national challenge. This is our an indigenous company that's taking over this asset, that we understand that has even put down a lot of money in terms of because some of these things are as a result of it could be one or two things, or both, in terms of vandalization that happens in that area, and then the second one could be perhaps these assets they were taken over from Shell, have challenges in terms of age and the rest of it, but they needed to be. The crisis needed to be taken as a national one, and then provided all the support that they need, to be able to handle this, But so it's a learning process, It's a crisis that has come, that has provided what you call lessons, in terms of such a huge problem could come up, perhaps it will provide them the opportunity to be able to deal with this in future in a better way, than has happened this time. But every opportunity or every crisis is an opportunity to learn, to pick one or two or three things from, so that you can address what will happen next, or you can prevent what will happen in future. So it's the first one we are hearing of an indigenous company that is facing this kind of crisis, and that is more familiar with international oil companies, who have the, first of all, they have the technology and the equipment to deal with
handle
this crisis, to handle these things, So if I haven't succeeded over this, I mean, I think they've said they've deployed quite a lot of instruments or things to try to deal with this the problem, and I think they are beginning to have it under control. But first, we need to recognize that it is an indigenous company, that is 6 years old, dealing with this kind of crisis, and being an indigenous company, which has reported 70%, we are told, of vandalization of that particular trunk line. Experts say they need to be supported, because what has happened could be as a result of vandalization, of the wellhead, and because it's indigenous, it needs that support, to help you deal with something that is it's a national crisis, not just looking at it from a single a company point of view.
Okay. But we must say, amid this crisis, ITO is actually handling it well to some extent for a company that's just starting, an indigenous company. I mean, they responded to communities with relief materials, right?
Exactly. Because, of course, they've responded well. Before now we didn't hear so much crisis with community, but with this coming up, they've responded. They have dealt with the communities, in terms of having that relationship with the communities,
yes.
Going around and trying to keep everybody, calming everybody, and then providing relief materials as well, to the communities that in the area, and while the major problem was being dealt with. So we could say, yes, you're right. They've responded well as far as community relations is concerned. But the major thing is that having this big crisis under control and learning from it, going forward, it's something that they will take away from this.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Mr. Philip. We'll see how the stories develop this week.
Thank you very much, Esther.
All right. That was Philip Isakba, the publisher, Business AM, Nigeria's fastest growing financial and business newspaper. That's all for now. Stay tuned for more.